Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So, I only got a few minutes, so I just wanted to share a couple of links with you guys and talk a little bit about what's going to take place in 2024, because I have the belief that there is going to be some sort of liquidity crisis taking place in 2024, right? Now, whether or not that forces the Federal Reserve to drop interest rates or not, I don't know, but this could be one of the reasons that the Fed would drop interest rates if they were to do it, right? Is that the liquidity crisis that would begin to take place within the bond market. Right? That would be probably one of the biggest issues that would happen within the economy. So now what would this liquidity crisis really look like? So if we can imagine the bond market itself, right? Not like corporate bonds and not the municipal bonds or anything like that, but U.S. government debt. U.S. government debt is the most safe, liquid, undeniable asset out there, guaranteed to pay. Right? If there is a bond out there that is going to get paid, the United States is guaranteed to pay it because we have a printing press to do it. No questions about it. Now, whether or not it has a purchasing power, the dollar that's making the payment, whether or not that has a purchasing power is a whole other question behind it, right? But the bond will take place, the payment of the bond. Now, if there is ever an issue within this particular market, it would create chaos across the globe. See, the United States dollar is the world reserve currency. So when nations want to do deals with each other, they generally do it in US dollars. Yes, there is the BRICS nations out there, and there's no denying them. But the amount of world trade that the BRICS nations are doing comparatively to what the United States dollar does, it doesn't even come close. The United States dollar is by far the supreme leader. Now, when these deals get done, and they're being done in dollars, a lot of times they're actually being done in U.S. treasuries. They're not holding dollars because dollars actually cost money to hold. They're holding U.S. treasuries because if they hold U.S. treasuries, they get at least a little bit of return for holding them. And then they're accepted as if they're U.S. dollars. Now, this makes them a very interesting asset when you consider that. However, if there was ever a moment in time in which that somebody goes to sell that U.S. Treasury and they cannot find a buyer for it, that would create some major ripples throughout the entire world reserve currency status. So now it is imperative that those U.S. Treasuries stay liquid, meaning that if there is a buyer or seller out there, that transaction will take place no matter what. And if you ever come to a time in which that the seller goes to sell this bond and the buyer is not there, the price of that bond begins to fall and the yields begin to rise. And if it takes place in a dramatic fashion, it can really start sending the interest rates into some chaotic fashion, as the debts that the U.S. government needs to pay are no longer being paid because of the U.S. Treasury liquidity market. Now, I know that's kind of confusing on its own, but when the United States goes to pay a debt, generally it's borrowing money to do it. Okay? So if you cannot sell the U.S. Treasury, right, then how are you able to borrow the money in order to pay that debt? This is where the problem begins to take place. So now, if you look at what's going on with the U.S. Treasury right now, the Treasury General Account, it is loaded with a lot of money. Way more money than typically would be sitting in this account. Right? And now I know a lot of people are saying, yes, this is so they can roll that money over onto the U.S. Treasuries. But take a look at not only that link that I leave to the Federal Reserve showing the Treasury General Account and the amount of money that's in it, but then take a look at the links that I leave below that. And think about this for just a second, because the links below the one that I leave for the Federal Reserve is going to be links to news articles, one of them from the Wall Street Journal and another one from Reuters. The one from Wall Street Journal is talking about the planned buybacks, the planned bond buybacks coming from the United States Treasury. They have already announced this months ago. And now if you think about what is a bond buyback going to look like, well, that means the Treasury is going to step in wherever the liquidity issue begins to rise. And if they say, hey, here's a particular bond that's going up for sale, or people are looking to sell this, or there's a lot of people looking to sell it, and there's not a lot of buyers out there, the United States Treasury will step up and do it. And they'll buy that back. Now, if you think about it, if you look at it in the fashion that the Federal Reserve would be buying bonds, it's providing that liquidity, right? That's what the Fed was doing when they go out there and they buy the bonds. See, the Fed can't go straight to the Treasury and buy bonds. Like during the quantitative easing programs, that's when the Federal Reserve is buying the bonds from the primary dealers. The primary dealers are the ones who go to auction and buy these treasuries, right? Or buy the bonds from the Treasury. Once they have purchased them, then the Federal Reserve comes in and buys them from those guys. But when a bond gets purchased, it's being purchased with money that has already come into existence. Right? This is, otherwise it would be monetizing the debt, and that would be technically illegal for the Federal Reserve to do, even though that's technically what they're doing. But it's not in the same fashion where they go and monetize the debt directly. Right? So now, if there was a liquidity issue typically within the bond market, the Federal Reserve would step up and say, hey, we're going to be there to take place, right? We will buy these bonds and provide the liquidity needed for the banking system. But if the Federal Reserve isn't there to do it, who's going to do it, right? The only other place to be is either the market, right, or the government itself. And now the government itself is planning this. The U.S. Treasury is saying, yes, when this moment takes place, we are planning to step up. Now, the Reuters article is saying that this is not to deal with liquidity crisis issues, but that's exactly what it is. I mean, it can't be explained any other way, other than saying, hey, when there's not a buyer for this, that's the liquidity issue. It needs to have a buyer-seller no matter what, right? Instantaneous, because it is the most liquid market, because it is the asset being used as the world reserve currency, and if that gets disrupted, the whole economy begins to start to disrupt, right? I mean, that's the way it goes down. And so now the Treasury is saying, and they are proving through the Treasury General Account, that they are willing and able and going to step up and buy these bonds and provide that liquidity. So this is, this is where I think a lot of times when we think about like what is going to happen within the economy going into the future, right? Because is the Federal Reserve really going to be there, right? They're unwinding their balance sheet. Can they continue to do the operation as what they are doing right now for a time? Continue to unwind their balance sheet, continue to keep the interest rates elevated during a time of liquidity crisis where everybody is knowing that the Federal Reserve would go back into money printing because that's what they have always done. But yet here it is, planned for us, or showing us in their plans that they plan on doing the bond buyback. Sorry, I'm having a hard time speaking. But they are planning this, they are showing it to us. They are proving it through the account, right? People ask me all the time, how are they going to do this? I don't know. I mean, I really don't know, but they are saying that they are going to do something about it, right? They're not talking a lot about it in the corporate media. So, I don't know. Like, to me, this seems pretty obvious that they're setting it up to do this. And I don't know what that impact is going to be like on the economy when this begins to take place. Because if there is the liquidity issue, I guess this is what people are anticipating, that in 2024 there is going to be a lowering of interest rates. If there is a bond buyback situation taking place, my mind says that interest rates will most likely be elevated because of that. If the bond yields go up and the price falls, that would be a perfect opportunity for the Treasury to come back in and buy back its own debt at a cheaper price, relieving the debt burden that it has. I know this seems so far off of a concept, but I don't know. I mean, to me, it seems pretty evident. All right, I got to go back to work. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.